Welcome to Nuanced Beauty, because the world is nuanced and we think that's beautiful. Hi guys, welcome back to Nuanced Beauty.
Welcome to Nuanced Beauty, because the world is beautiful and we think that's nuanced. I got that backwards. I'm here for Christina. Say hi to the people, Christina.
Oh my goodness. So there you have it. Bill and I are here for another episode. Welcome to the new year. We're recording this in December, but you're going to hear this in January. So it will be 2024.
And I don't know if you guys know this because Christina did such a great job keeping the podcast up in my absence, but I was gone for a good 5 weeks. So I haven't been in front of this mic for a minute.
He hasn't. We haven't recorded in a minute. I sprinkled in a lot more interviews, and I have a lot more coming up ahead. And we're going to keep those rolling probably every other week, trying to do an interview and interspersed with Bill and I chatting about random nuanced things. And he was in a shipyard for 5 weeks, and me and the boys were here just rocking it, or not rocking
Socking it.
We're socking it. Yeah. There was some big socks and tears, like hitting each other's socks. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so for this episode, I wanted to talk about this idea of a transition zone.
Because as we already established here at the top of the podcast, it can be awkward because you come back after a long absence and just start shouting into mics, and your wife's looking at you like, what the hell are you doing?
Great intro, honey. Great intro.
I appreciate it. I was practicing that.
So what is the transition zone? First off, I'm going to say that I don't know if somebody else coined this concept or if it goes by a different word. I imagine that I could have read this from someone else or something similar. But ultimately, the idea is it's this funky in-between feeling when someone is about to travel or
a change is
there's
about
a
to
change.
Take place.
Something is about to interrupt your regularly scheduled day and program, and you're going to feel it.
And you see it coming.
And you're going to react. And you probably see it coming. It could be an unexpected, but for us, this really, really applies from us working ashore, sailing, and traveling for work. We've both had long stints away from the home. Mm-hmm. And I think this could also apply to other folks getting a new job promotion. Mm-hmm. You're mentally preparing for this step up in position or a change of job, and it's not quite there, but you're anticipating that it's going to come.
Being in the job search was another thing that we've lived through with you.
We've lived through that one a lot.
Yeah,
that's a high one for us. Getting ready for marriage, getting ready for babies, and even military deployments. And I was chatting with a gal about this topic, and she's like, "Oh, this totally applies because we are empty nesters, mm-hmm. and our kids are home for the holidays." Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, her and her husband have to accommodate the fact that it is not just her and husband, but the kiddos are home. And as much as they love their kids, it's a variable that is now in the mix, and it disrupts their regular program.
Yeah, there's a level of not everything is where I left it. Because there are other people in this house now.
There are other variables in this home called people.
Yeah, and how dare they also be here?
That was a dig.
A little
so
bit.
Let's go into our history of comings and goings.
I feel like I can make that dig because we've grown so much and do so much better now.
Yeah, and we can acknowledge it was there, and
it's no longer hurtful because we've healed from it.
Yeah, for sure.
So, a little bit of our story, and I'm sure we've told parts of this, is we got married the Friday after we graduated from college. We graduated on Monday. We got married on Friday. We moved to a whole new city, St. Louis. And within a month, I left for sea.
And the day I drove you to the airport was the day that I started my first day on a professional job.
Mm-hmm. And I was gone for 101 days.
101.
And in those 101 days, I had probably the worst 101 days of my life.
Yeah, that was a bad ship.
That was a terrible ship. And we don't need to go too deeply into that. But I, in that time, put every hope I had that things would be better when I got home. Because I had this new wife. in this new place, and everything will just be great. As soon as I get home, it's going to be great.
Yeah.
And that's
All
not
these
how.
built up expectations of how loving and gracious and cool and awesome your home is going to be.
Immediately when I came through the door, it's going to be great, right?
Uh-huh.
That's not how things work.
How did it go?
Well, I got home on a Thursday afternoon around 1 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
These things burned into my memory, and you didn't even think to take the day off or anything for me. So I got to the apartment, and I just started pacing, just like walking around. Just like I couldn't turn the TV on. I couldn't eat. I was just walking around the house, just like waiting for you to get back. Just like, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, 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 boy. But also like just being just like intensely close to the thing that I've been desiring. And I realized I just said out loud that I viewed you as a thing. This thing that I've been desiring.
So you're anxiously waiting for me to get home.
And anxious is an understatement. Let's put a capital A on that, anxious. So we had this big window in the front of the apartment, and I see your car come in, and I see you walking up the driveway, and I see you walk past the window, and I go running to the door, and you come in the door, and I throw my arms out, and you say, "Hey, hon," and walked right past me into the kitchen.
I walked past you. Oh, because my hands were full.
Your hands were full with, which, in my mind, how this is going to happen is whatever was in your hands is going to drop
it
as you just
run into your arms.
into my arms. Hey, hon, walk right into the kitchen. And I follow, my arm's still out. Just following you around the apartment as you put your lunch away and make your lunch for the next day and feed the cat or whatever.
The routine.
Your routine. You had a routine.
I had a routine that got me through the past 101 days of solo living.
Whereas what got me through 101 days of solo misery at sea was my wife was going to love me when I got home.
Which I did love you, but I loved you differently than what you were expecting. And then, so that plays into my perspective of I've been home, I've been making life work as like just an individual. And it's kind of that annoying idea of like women are crockpots and men are like microwaves or whatever. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. And how you could like warm up like faster or whatever, and I like need time or whatever. So the idea of jumping into being vulnerable, like, yes, we're married, but we're newlyweds. It's our first home. You've been gone for over 3 months.
We'd been married less than a month when I left.
Yeah. And we had the honeymoon and that, but now like we're kind of starting real life. And from my perspective and you getting home, I'm thinking like, I'm guarded. I'm really happy that you're home, but I'm also like, I don't know what to do. You're here. You haven't been here. And not that I don't want you here, but I just don't know what to do. And so I'm not in the level of absence. I want to warm up to you being here.
Yeah, at that point in our marriage, on November 1st, 2011, 80% of our time married had been separate.
Yeah.
So there is because nobody knows what being married is going to be like. And no one, and so you're always learning how you function as a married couple.
Yeah,
and we had the extra wrench, kink at the cog. I just bounced, and it took me years to realize the empathy of, wow, you got married to this guy. We moved to a new city, and dude just bounced for like 3 months. He was like, all right, you got this, right? You set up the bills. You leased the apartment. You set up our entire life of everything. You got a cat.
Yep. No, we had the cat.
We got Sasha.
Sasha came later. KP, we only had KP at that point.
Whatever. That's how much I was paying attention.
Anyways, yes.
My whole point is you did all that while I was just gone.
So yeah, I had this regular routine in process and life going. And then we had to make the transition of like both of us being in the home. And as you could tell from this, it was just wonky as all get up.
I was crushed.
You were crushed.
Absolutely crushed.
I was like, trying to figure out how to be vulnerable or whatever and have feelings, which is already hard.
Vulnerable or like whatever.
Yeah. So from my personality in general, all those added layers, to just like adjusting,
Mm-hmm.
adjusting to this new time that you're home and we're both home, and now we get to do life together.
Yeah. How do you function as one of two instead of one of one?
Mm-hmm.
Which it takes time to reintegrate, and that brings us into this transition space. So this was our very first time, and then I feel like we've gotten a little bit better at it as
Every
years
time.
have gone on. My next job after that, I was doing 3 weeks away only. It was only 3 weeks away, not a big deal, right?
Right.
But that meant that rather than having 2 or 3 transitions a year, I had like 12 transitions a year.
Yeah.
Which is way harder.
We found, and that was on the East Coast. Then we moved to the West Coast. So it was like 3 weeks on, but it was a whole day of travel each. So it was really 23 days on and 19 days home when we were in Seattle. So there were every single month was a transition. And so kind of depending on how you process things, I look forward. I spend a lot of the time in the future planning, thinking about and foreseeing and trying to be there instead of being here. And so every 3 weeks, approaching that time to leave, probably like that week of, it was like, okay, you're about to go.
We would go grocery shopping and you'd be like, what do you want to get? And I'm like, I don't care. I'm not going to be here.
And so it was hard. Like it was very hard, those transitions and just figuring it out. But being able to name it, I think it just like, oh. And I think the light bulb, maybe it really went on when you came ashore and I went to sea. So we switched roles. And I think, right? Is that accurate? I mean, I think we knew we
were already getting there.
We were getting there, but I think there was new compassion.
Like when I was doing the 3 weeks, we kind of realized what it was, because it wasn't the long distance, the long time apart. That was really the problem. It was the transitions, and having the 3 weeks on really highlighted that. We just didn't, because we really couldn't grow in that time because we were never not in a transitional phase.
Yeah.
Yes, when I came, I didn't come ashore at that point. I had the shoreside sailing job, the ROS gig, and you went to sea. Yeah, there was a. Oh yeah, I have to do everything in this house all of a sudden.
And this is what it's like on this.
These are systems that I've developed and have put a lot of thought and energy into, and you better damn follow them when you get home. This is how I load the dishwasher. Not true at all. I just Postmates most of that trip.
Yeah. So most recently, since moving to Florida, we've had just 2 shipyard periods. And again, now it's the family dynamic, having 2 kiddos and what the transitions look like. They're just a little different, but they're there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you touched on this, the thing that really changed is naming what it is and understanding that it's not. Well, I say it this way. I'm a middle-aged white guy interested in fitness. So my Instagram shows me a lot of like cold plunge videos. Like I've watched Joe Rogan, therefore I get a lot of advertisements for cold plunge. And one of the things they talk about with cold plunge, if you don't know, that's when you dive into a pool of like 30-degree water. Your body starts to convulse and you can't take a full breath and you shake. And what you're trained to do, and you're also trained to this if you ever like fall through the ice on a lake, is that it will pass. Like your body will adjust. It might still hurt, but you'll be able to function after a short time. And I feel like that's where we've landed on these transitions of like, I've learned to come into, whether you're coming home or I'm coming home, going into that space with patience. And I want to say like low expectations because that sounds awful, but
expecting the unexpected.
Yeah,
that's a corny phrase, but
just the willingness to take what it is
happens.
Yeah, and not to put my hope in a specific outcome. Like we were definitely not gonna do it in the entryway of the house, which is totally what I thought was gonna happen that first time around.
Oh my goodness!
Yes. Yeah, it was a nice entryway.
It was a very large entryway. Not in that regard. So I hope you're kind of getting from this the characteristics that you could kind of consider to cue you in that, like, oh, I'm experiencing that thing. This is a transition.
The same thing. It's the
Like,
exact same transition when like the kids come home for Christmas,
uh-huh,
or when the kids first leave.
uh-huh.
Like there's suddenly like a
disruption.
a disruption to the household,
And everybody might be a little irritable
they
or
might have everyone has a
forgetful.
thought about what that's going to be like.
Uh-huh.
And when it's
And
not that,
when they're not jiving,
then you get that frustration.
mm-hmm. And so where's the beauty in this? Let's head in that direction.
So the beautiful thing in our particular situation, because not everyone does the thing that we do where we're gone for long periods, is that I get to miss you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't take you for granted in that way, because like we're gone for huge periods of time. So in a way, we have to date again. And there's a lot of like talk and
like rediscover each other.
There's a rediscovery, and I think date's the word I want to use though, because that's something that like in marriage counseling and in church they talk about dating your spouse.
Oh yeah, okay.
And that's kind of what we have to do when we come back together after a trip apart. We have to kind of like actively try to reconnect as a couple.
Yeah, and I will say the other part of that is we don't sail anymore, right? Mm-mm. But if you were getting to a really crummy spot, heading off to work on the ship allowed the tension to fizzle out from like where you weren't jiving.
Yeah, for sure. It's a little bit perspective. Because now you're suddenly faced with a much bigger obstacle than the fact that your husband just will not load the dishwasher correctly. Like, oh no, he's now just gone.
Like totally not in the picture.
And yeah, great. My dishwasher's loaded correctly, but I have other bigger problems now.
I think another area of beauty in it is just like you kind of said, but we've grown through those bumps, and we've appreciated each other more in the absence and the distance. And it really does kind of capture that idea of absence makes the heart grow fonder. Right. And I also think that one part of this is that it's allowed us to relate to other people, like to have compassion, and potentially even move into action when we know someone else has like a traveling situation, or we know that they're going to spend time apart with their family. We get it. We've been there.
Oh yeah. I mean, that first time you went to see after Zeke was born, and I went to some other like men in the church who I respected, some like the older guys who I would go to for advice. Like, yeah, man, my wife's going to sea. She's going to be gone for like 10 weeks. Just going to be me and my 8-month-old. And they looked at me like I was speaking Klingon.
They're like, in the headlights.
Like,
I don't know what you just said.
Yeah, one of the guys legitimately said, I do not know what to say to that. And fair, like I get it. It's not something that a lot of men have experienced. Women experience all the time
with men traveling.
With men traveling, military spouses. It's definitely a thing, which is why I was all prideful about it. Like, yeah, I can do it. Like, women do this all the time. I can be a competent parent. But when I tried to like seek advice from more experienced husbands, they just looked at me blankly.
They didn't know what to say to that. Yeah.
So now, as I enter new phases of life, I get to be the one that says, "Oh yeah, dude, I totally get that," rather than, "Whoa,
what does that
You're
even
doing
mean?
Lady work?" That's not what they said, but they essentially said that.
Yeah, total confusion. And I think that that's where I think the military does it well.
Oh, really?
I think that's where they bond too. Because everybody gets that. They get that, similar to how we do.
It was great though. I got like people acted like you died. I got meal trains. It was a whole thing.
Oh yeah, when I left. Yeah, when Zeke was little, and that was only a 30-day trip.
Well, it was supposed to be longer, but then it got cut short for the shipyard. It was always going to be 30.
Yeah, because we were going into the shipyard, so it was like 35 days. Yeah. But then, had I become a permanent, it would have been a 75-day rotation.
Right. But yeah, the way like the church like rallied around me of like
meal train.
I got a meal trained for this. I'm like, she's not dead, guys. I'll take it. Sure, I love lasagna as much as the next guy. Yeah, but like I have one kid, which isn't that hard to take care of just one kid. And she's
perspective though. I mean, it is in the beginning, but then you have two, and you're like, oh, one was easy.
Oh yeah, and I have some stories from that trip. He only fell down the stairs twice, so it was fine. But sorry, I sidetracked us with just how much support I got because people didn't know how to handle that.
Yeah, the idea of how it has grown us in compassion so we can relate to others. And you just shared stories of where it's like, oh, people don't totally get this. So if only this provides context for holiday travels or short work travels. There is such a thing, and some people have to do these transition zones more frequently.
Yeah, and we're recording this before Christmas to break some fourth walls here, but I think that idea of when you see someone who you hadn't seen in a long time, you have expectations about what that's going to be like. I think that happens for a lot of folks around Christmas when they see their families, and they have all these happy memories of their families, and they think, oh, it's going to be great once the family's all together again, and it's usually not.
Or it's just okay.
But just okay sounds awful when you
compared
expect it to be perfect.
All you built up in your mind.
Exactly.
So
letting go of that expectation and just enjoying the person who's in front of you, and not the image that you've idealized, you've cultivated, you've forced this person into.
Yeah, and with that, I think we could. I had a couple tips written down to challenge you to hold on to the beauty during these transition zones. The first one was choose to stay committed to your spouse. In our example that we shared here, we had so many a fight and disappointment in these moments. But the words or the idea that this is the end, we didn't allow those words to take root. And we continued to lean in to each other and grow through each of those fights or misunderstandings and learn to be a little more gracious or forgiving in that. So maybe for spouses in this, choose to stay and choose to fight through it and fight the good way through it. And then as you just mentioned, the other tip I have here is the try hard to be present in today. Be present today. Some people are more, reminiscent of the past. And so they might be bringing in the expectations of this is what it was like 5 years ago. Why can't it be just like that? Some people are more moving into the future like me, like, oh, I can't wait for this to happen, and dreaming of what the possibilities are. And if those possibilities don't happen, be present. Present today, and try and cherish those moments in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard to not say this. I'm going to say it, but it's a little bit comes down to it is what it is. And that is, the dude version of be present. It is what it is. And to open your heart in gratitude for where you are. And don't let the expectations of what you think it ought to be get in the way of being present with the people you love.
Thanks for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and in the spirit of nuance, I hope you found something that you could agree with and you could disagree with, and still choose to lean in. Give us a follow, rating, and review, and consider sharing this episode with a friend to continue the dialogue and help us grow. Until next time.